It's really great to be with you. We have people from all over the world on our call today in our living room, the Bauman Wellness Lunch and Learn series. And it's really a delight to bring Nancy Birang forward. And I met her in Santa Cruz, and I saw what a cool person she was, and you know, just what a heart, what a mind. And so, I've had the pleasure of being with Nancy for a good 20 years now. So I'm going to read her bio. Nancy is a Bowman College graduate and was a beloved holistic nutrition faculty for Bowman College Santa Cruz for over a decade. She provides science-based information on the use of food, herbs, and supplements and testing to support her clients in their healing journey. Nancy is a strong advocate of nutrition education for children and families. She's a co-founder and board president and educator at Nourishing Generations Education Project. Big shout out to Nourishing Generations, nonprofit in Santa Cruz area that brings chefs, nutritionists, fitness trainers to schools and community centers to counteract the rising epidemic of family obesity, diabetes, immune dysfunction, and I would also say mental health disorders, because there's a lot of that going around. So with that, I'd like to welcome Nancy.
Great. Thank you very much. It's really lovely to be here.
Yeah.
All right. So that you don't have to kill yourself writing notes. You will get a copy of the slides, and there are several recipes that you might want to check out, recipes that I commonly share with people who are in various stages of cancer. So, food matters for cancer. Now, please read over the disclaimer. And I consider nutrition and food as part of your health plan. And oftentimes with cancer, the treatment is focused on the disease. It's focusing on eradicating or debulking the tumor, and not a lot on the person who actually has the cancer. So that's one of the roles that we have, which is such an important role. So people who are well-nourished and hydrated can withstand cancer treatments. And we're going to focus on what your health plan is, which is really what's under your control. So much of the cancer journey is not under your control. You go on a roller coaster ride of treatments and appointments. So my job, my honor that I have, is to help people to better nourish themselves. And that plays a large role in their ability to have a strong health plan. So what are the goals? So our goals are to be nourished, goals are to be strong, and to be resilient. These are overarching goals for life in general, but also for overall disease prevention. There's a lot of commonalities for cancer with all chronic diseases, Alzheimer's, diabetes, heart disease. So what can we do to be strong, what's under our control, and to help us better manage any disease, but specifically if you think of managing cancer, and oftentimes we're thinking of managing cancer, because cancer isn't the death threat that it used to be. There are people who are living many years and decades with long-term cancer. So I like to think of a cancer management plan. And what's our goals? Nourish, strong, and resilient. Emphasizing the resilient. And resilience is that act of being able to ride the wave and withstand whatever things are coming your way. And the roller coaster ride of treatments and appointments can be really hard to take. But I think of this like punching ball. You get punched down, but you come back up again. So we want you to have the strength and the resilience, and you're strong, you're grounded, you're nourished, and you can create an environment where cancer cannot grow. So how do we achieve these goals? With nourishment, and we can think of nourishment on many levels. How do we nourish? Well, yeah, it's taking in food and taking in drink, but it's actually more wide-reaching than that. Starting out with the breath and with breathing. It sounds simple, like duh, you breathe, but when you're stressed or not feeling well, you're not always breathing optimally. Breathing is how we take in oxygen. Cancer does not do well in a well-oxygenated environment. It's a low-oxygen environment. We want to breathe. We want to nourish, take in oxygen to all of our cells. And ways to do this is just reminding people, maybe wake up and have some stretches and some cleansing breathing and gratitude practice, maybe taking breaths before a meal, because we know that can calm the nervous system and actually better optimize digestion. So much of what we do, so much of the conversations I'm having with my clients are so simple and basic, but if people aren't doing the simple and basic stuff because they're all flipped out, then it's not working. So just reminding people, let's breathe together. Movement, having a movement practice, even if it's 10 minutes walking around your apartment. Movement helps everything. Boosts the immune system, supports digestion, again, supports oxygenation. And then drinking. Dehydration is a game changer. Dehydration's number one cause of fatigue. Huge difference between people going through cancer treatment who are well hydrated and not hydrated. And I like to have people take in nourishment when they're drinking. So if I could put some lemon in my water, or perhaps some of the liquid intake could be broth or could be herb tea. So I really like to share recipes about different herb teas. I gave you, or you will get, a recipe on a ginger herb tea, a ginger tea, long simmered fresh ginger with some added herbs that you might have on hand, such as cinnamon. So using that opportunity of hydrating to also get in some cancer fighting power. So again, I need to remind people, well, how much are you drinking? And then there's a lot of questions. How much water should I drink? So really helping people have that optimal hydration. And then eating is the bulk of what we'll talk about, is what do I eat? Because there's a lot of confusion around that and a lot of variability. So the goals for self-nourishment, or the end result, is building that life force to maintain that strong terrain to help you manage the cancer process. So people who are currently in treatment, what are the goals there? So nutrition, also, if somebody is well nourished, they can better withstand the treatments. There's nothing more disempowering than starting a chemo process and not being able to finish it because of bone marrow suppression and low white counts. So optimizing your hydration and your nutrition during treatment, building energy and resilience. We know that fatigue is a common side effect of cancer and cancer treatment. And this can be very challenging. It's a different kind of fatigue. So we use specific nutrition and general nutritional advice to help build energy. Maintaining muscle mass is important. And then repairing damage, because we know that some cancer treatments can be very, very damaging to normal tissue, the GI lining, the bone marrow, the hair follicles. But normal tissue can repair, but it needs nutrients to do that. So during a cancer treatment and post-treatment, we may be in a state of increased repair mode, and we need nutrients for that. We're coaching people about what to eat, when to eat, boosting immunity. Unfortunately, a lot of cancer treatments can decrease immunity. They can suppress the bone marrow, upset the GI lining. So this is a time when we want to take in some herbs, some supplements, some good foods that can help to boost immunity. Enhancing treatment and minimizing side effects is the goal as well. This is why staying hydrated and nourished, and enhancing quality of life. Even if I'm working with somebody with a very serious, maybe even end of life situation, we want them to be better nourished. We want to have that clarity. It's quite a bit of individual variation, depending on where people are. What is the specific diagnosis? What tissues are being affected by the cancer at what stage? What are the specific treatments? And then what are the treatment side effects? And the big category is post-treatment and survivorship. which is I find is a big interest in nutritional support. While people are going through the treatment, they are just in a survivor mode of getting through it. Doctors are telling them, don't take any herbs or supplements. They don't have the time or the energy to focus on a lot of different dietary focus. But once they're through, they move into that mode of wanting to prevent a recurrence and looking back on their lives saying, hey, how can I make my life better so I don't get a recurrence? So I'll find a lot of people, this is the group that reaches out for nutrition support. And also this is the group that once you've finished your treatment, it's like you're gone. You're no longer with your oncologist. You're just sort of on your own. And I hear people say over and over again that, wow, I was on this ride, and then all of a sudden I was completely cut off. So this is a great time, a great demographic group to focus on. Of course, when you're working with people, we have to consider who they are and their context. If you remember the 4 C's from Bauman College curriculum, who are they? What's their constitution? What is their condition? What challenges do they have? And then what's their context? Like, what's their financial situation in terms of being able to afford food? And then commitment. So one thing I have found is this demographics is people who are challenged with cancer usually have a high level of compliance because they're worried. So I've had clients I've worked with diabetes, and I've had kind of marginal compliance in terms of diet and lifestyle changes. And that same client would call me 5 years later and say, hey, I've just been diagnosed with breast cancer. Let's talk. And so in terms of compliance, this can sometimes be a pretty compliant group. So I have a lot of slides here, but the intent isn't just for me to power through the slides. So if you're like thinking of a question, go for it, because when you get the slides, there'll be a sort of reference. I put slides that covered highlights of things I thought you might find interesting. But if you do have a question that you think would benefit the group, you can put it in the chat. There's a lot of confusion. Everybody and his brother has advice on what to eat: shark fin, gel tablets. So there's an overwhelming and contradictory amount of information, and many people are just in a fear-based mode. They're afraid to eat blueberries because the oncology nurse told them that eating blueberries will negate their antioxidant, will negate their chemotherapy treatment. So there's a lot of misinformation, and sometimes coming from sources, they're doctors and they're nurses. And so this is the environment that you're dealing with. So I find myself calming people down, say, whoa, give a little nutrition handshake and say, it's okay, do the best that you can. Let's not worry about the blueberries. Because if they're thinking blueberries is going to cause them a problem, maybe I'm going to take a break from blueberries and I'll have them eat apples and grapes. And we'll slowly start to calm people down and give them basic common sense nutrition is what a lot of people need. So the big modifiable nutrition factors, dehydration is huge. The number one cause of fatigue, and fatigue is a very big side effect of cancer and cancer treatment. Staying hydrated, but not just having 2 liters or massive amounts of water, really important to have water, liquids with minerals. So this is why, especially if people aren't feeling well, say, well, let's maybe sip on some broth. Let's put some lemon, maybe put a little coconut or coconut milk into your bone broth. So I spend a lot of time working with people saying, how can we make these nourishing drinks even more nourishing? Malnutrition, even people that are overweight, it's like Dr. Jeffrey Bland says, the overconsumptive, undernourished, and that's where we are right now. So if there are deficiencies in B vitamins or magnesium, that's going to affect their energy pathways quite a bit. So looking at weak links, getting to know a person and saying, where are you? Where are the weak links? And how can we address those and make you stronger? Blood sugar balance is huge. Pre-diabetic, diabetic. So I'll do an entire talk on blood sugar balance, how to manage insulin sensitivity. So I work for Cancer Care Point. I work for 4 different nonprofits that provide complementary cancer services. The one I work for the most is Cancer Care Point in San Jose. So I give weekly talks. And so the talk that I just gave was on blood sugar insulin regulation. Being diabetic, pre-diabetic is a huge risk factor for cancer. And we have an epidemic of insulin resistance. And so teaching about what are the diet and lifestyle changes that you need to make to balance your blood sugar and your insulin to help you manage your cancer. And overweight and obese, it often goes with diabetes. Lifestyle factors, helping people come up with a health plan that includes movement. It includes stress management. So a lot of my clients are Silicon Valley people, very important jobs, very important companies, and they're just very stressed. They may be not eating properly. I often hear people say, wow, cancer, in a way, it's one of the best things that happened to me because I had to stop and I had to reevaluate my life, and I was on a train wreck. And they say that now I'm eating better, I'm taking time for myself. I realize that work isn't everything. Well, it'd be great if we didn't have to get the cancer to get to that point. So regular stress management techniques, Cancer Care Point, there are yoga classes, there are qigong classes, breathing, whatever works. Sleep, the same. So these lifestyle factors, looking at the person and deciding, well, what changes do we need to make? Who's the healthcare team? Doctors, nurses, technicians, especially during the early treatment phase, that's pretty much all they have time for. Doctors don't typically refer out to nutritionists or RDs unless there's a problem with extreme weight loss or head, neck, and throat cancers and they can't eat. Doctors have a mistrust of nutritionists because they're worried that nutritionists are going to recommend a bunch of supplements and herbs that can interfere with their protocols. So I have oncologists that refer to us, and they know I actually have communicated with them and reassured them that it's food, 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 food. And they're more likely to refer to you if they realize that you're not going to push a bunch of supplements. And I think that nutrition consultation is underutilized. People who are in treatment oftentimes don't have an appetite and they feel bad. They feel they should be eating something and they're not. Coming up with simple, easy meals for them, it can be so important. So where these people are getting the information is mostly from nonprofits, and what works well are group settings. People don't seem as willing to reach out on a one-to-one basis, but they will attend group talks, whether they're Zoom talks or in-person talks or food demos. And so that seems to be a really good venue. And also it's hard to communicate a healthy diet and lifestyle in one time, right? So if you have weekly talks and you have like 4 to 6 week programs, you can build on the material. And I get a lot of feedback from clients from Cancer Care Point. They'll say, oh, I made that recipe for black-eyed pea salad. It was really, really good. And hey, I joined a badminton class and, thanks for those tips. And it's really nice getting that positive feedback, but a lot of that information is given in a group setting. And then we also get peer-to-peer sharing. So we'll talk about farmers markets. Say, where can you find spring garlic? Right now is spring, even though it's not spring garlic is in the farmers market. Well, that's just wonderful. So we talk about the farmers market. So people in my class will say, hey, check out the farmers market at Saratoga. They've got that bitter melon that you were talking about. And, well, if you go to the dollar store, they have apple cider vinegar on sale. So I really love it when we have the group sharing going on. And then these are the other members of the healthcare team, and you might even think of additional members: a massage therapist, social worker. Social workers are the ones who will refer clients to me. Social worker just kind of takes people who are shell shocked when they get a cancer diagnosis, and they're like, "Oh my God, I don't know what to do." They have to learn how to apply for disability. They want to learn how to talk to their children about cancer. There are just so many concerns that come up, and the social worker is the guiding light. And then when they say, "Well, I'm so upset I can't even eat," and the social worker will say, "You know what? Here, why don't you call Nancy and she'll talk to you. And you guys figure out some simple things that you can eat." So again, making sure that people are getting the support that they need. And we know that being socially connected is a much higher prognosis. We really don't want people doing this journey alone. So these are kind of the top 5 that I'm going to focus on. Regular meals at regular times to balance blood sugar and energy. Now, here's where there's a lot of variability. Back in the day, people were taught 3 square meals a day and have breakfast within an hour of being awake. Well, that doesn't work for everybody, especially if we're doing intermittent fasting, especially if we are diabetic or low blood sugar. So that's one of our first jobs, is to work with somebody, partner with them and say, let's figure out an eating time frame that works for you, not just what to eat, but when to eat. We don't want to go long periods of time without eating, but we also don't want to have large servings one time a day. So balancing blood sugar is huge, and also supporting energy levels, and finding maybe some people do better with 6 mini meals a day. What works for that individual is what we focus on. And then appropriate portions. In this country, we are really challenged with portion distortion. And people will eat what's on the plate because it tastes good, but it may be too much. So if your goal is maybe losing weight, perhaps we need to look at reducing the overall portion and then looking at what makes up those portions. Eating mostly plants is probably our number one. A plant-focused diet is not plant-based, vegan, or vegetarian. It means most of what you're eating are plants. And this is what works for most people. If you're vegetarian or vegan, then we'll work with that as well. But if you have a mostly plant diet, there's a lot there: veggies, whole grains, fruit, beans, nuts, seeds, herbs, and spices. So my job, is to find creative ways to get in all of these wonderful, tasty plant foods, sometimes in easy ways. People who are in the throes of cancer treatment, they don't have the energy to cook. They're just barely making it. So I need to be simple. And animal foods in smaller amounts is high quality. So we really don't want to have meats with hormones, especially if you're managing a hormone-driven cancer, right? So teaching people and having people figure out where they can get pastured eggs. And these are more expensive as well, but it's more expensive, but you're eating less of them. And then cooking, making more of your own meals. Not that you're going to be in the kitchen all the time, but at least make an attempt to make some of your meals. So if you've been outsourcing all of your meals because of work schedule and various reasons, let's do some baby steps on connecting with your food. There's a great book by Michael Pollan. Maybe some of you have read it. It's called Cooked. And he gives a lot of statistics of the percentages of Americans that are outsourcing their food. Everything is convenience, and you eat in front of your desk. And we're losing the sacredness of the meal. And so our job is to pull people back in and say, eating is a sacred thing. If you can open up a can or a box of soup and heat it up, you're cooking. If you can boil an egg and put piece of bread in the toaster, you're cooking. So empowering people to be more connected to their food is really, and this, again, this really happens after the treatment because they're so busy and rigged out during the treatment that after treatment, you really get people who are basically transforming their diets. And it's just so wonderful to see this. A plant-focused diet is an abundance and diversity of plant foods. There's strong data showing that this is the number one marker of disease prevention. And so the abundance and diversity of gut bacteria is the number one determinant of successful disease prevention. The number one way to get a diverse and abundant good bacteria in the gut is by eating plant fibers. It's not by taking probiotic supplements or even cultured foods. It's taking the plant fibers that the gut bacteria eat. And so what a fun job I have. I get to turn people on to all of these. I go in and say, hey, get some garlic. Oh, pomegranates are in season. So let's put some pomegranates in our salad. So what can we do to diversify our diet? Fighting cancer with food. I like to share some of the behind the scenes molecular signaling that's going on because it's cool and it's profound. And foods contain bioactive compounds, right? Vitamins, minerals, hundreds of phytonutrients. They nourish the cells, they do cell-to-cell communication, and it's all about cell integrity, genomic stability. We know that one of the hallmarks of cancer are instability. Our cells are just weird and they start growing wildly. But we know, and this is the cool part, is that there's compounds in foods that can actually bring those weird growing cells, those dysregulated cells, back into the fold. Right. So this is kind of the coolness and the compliance factor of that. So when you're eating a blueberry instead of a corn chip, what are you doing? Hey, I'm nourishing, I'm regulating my cells. So here are some studies that'll just give you more information on that if you're interested. So it's about nutrigenomics, epigenetics. So it isn't just genetics, right? We know that the compounds in food are going to affect the expression of genes. This is huge. So being born with a BRCA mutation or P53 mutation doesn't mean necessarily you're going to get cancer because we know that there are compounds in food that can modify gene expression. So this is food is information, but food is also hope. Remember, what people eat is under their control, or it should be, right? I know there's a lot of addictive foods out there, but we're saying, hey, you are in charge of what you eat and how you live your life. And so by being in charge of what you eat, you are actually participating in this molecular nutrition, and you're actually helping your cells regulate. And that tends to have an inspirational effect. So an example of that is when you're having a cup of tea, and the tea that you're having, it may be a black tea or a green tea that's loaded with cancer-fighting polyphenols, or it could be a cup of chamomile tea that's loaded with apigenin. Those actually have cell-regulating effects, but the act of having your cup of tea is calming. So you don't have a cup of coffee that I'm going to sit down and have my coffee. Most people just kind of like the coffee, but tea, come on in, sit down and have a cup of tea. So Thich Nhat Hanh, who has the most lovely quotations, peace, happiness, and joy is possible during the time I drink my tea. There's a lovely book, one of my favorite books, called Cancer Hates Tea by Maria Uspensky, a woman who had cancer, very healthy diet, and she said, how can I get cancer? This is totally crazy. And so she did a lot of research, and she researched tea. So and wrote a book about it. It's just a lovely, easy to read book. But I'm thinking of drinking that tea as an example of cellular regulation on many levels. The tea polyphenols, the hundreds of compounds in whatever tea I'm drinking, in addition to the calming effect on my nervous system, which is a major effector of genetic regulation. So what to eat? Macronutrients and our micronutrients. I put water and fiber in there, and it's so beautiful too. Look at this cabbage. People I'll put this photo up and people say, well, can you eat that? Because people will use cabbage or kale as an ornament. Oh, yeah, you can eat it. See, the plant is talking to you. The plant is saying, check me out. I have all these colors. These colors are letting you know that I'm filled with antioxidants and all kinds of goodies that can really help keep you healthy. So my goal is to help people eat the macronutrients and the micronutrients in yummy, easy ways. And this is just more, oh, wow, tell me about the molecular pathways. So inflammation, major driver of all chronic diseases, especially cancer. We'll often test inflammatory markers. Well, we know that there are compounds in foods that can calm inflammation. What's an anti-inflammatory diet? That goes a long way in helping to actually manage a cancer. So you can geek out on the biochemical pathways, which is what I like to do. And I know not everybody wants to do that. People will say, what's that? Say, well, you don't have to even look at that. You can look at the green tea or the turmeric, the holy basil, and know that when you're having these foods and drinks, behind the scenes, this cool biochemical transformation is taking part. The other thing that's cool about foods, they act on cancer stem cells. There are no medications that can affect cancer stem cells. So cancer stem cells are the bugaboo. They're the guys that survive. Chemo doesn't touch them. Some immunotherapy does. But we know that food compounds, because we're connected with food, we have co-evolved with plants, and we know that there are hundreds of compounds that target cancer stem cells. And again, it's another compliance point when I'm saying, hey, here's why we want you to have these foods regularly in your diet. And I mentioned P53 mutation. It's an indicator of the aggressiveness of a tumor. It's one of the common markers. P53 is called the guardian of the genome, meaning that it's a tumor suppressor system, prevents tumors from growing. If this guy gets mutated, it can't do that job. But what we know is that there are foods and compounds in foods that can target this. And so much so, P53 is a big target for pharmaceutical intervention as well. So again, I keep showing this cabbage plant. This is just beautiful, knowing that this cabbage plant, it's targeting cancer stem cells. It's helping to regulate my P53. What a deal. And it tastes wonderful. So making a meal, again, we spend a lot of time on the basics. Abundant veggies. Veggies are the main course, about 50% of the plate. And again, the plate could be small, but I think we have an extra salad plate because they don't take a lot of space. Some starch. And this is where we really want diversification, because this is what really feeds the gut bacteria. They like the fibers and the starch. So turning people onto wild rice instead of white rice and brown rice, or adding lentils to brown rice, same cooking time, is to get in fiber, get in protein. And then like our quinoa and wild rice are more pseudo grains. They're more protein and fiber. People say, well, where do I get wild rice and how do I cook it? And maybe it's an acquired taste. So we may spend like a whole hour talking about cooking wild rice and maybe mixing it with some beans and greens and some mushrooms. And we've got like an amazing cancer-fighting yummy meal. Protein, people are always concerned about protein. How much protein do I need? When you are in a building mode during cancer repair mode, the protein needs typically increase. Doctors will often monitor blood, total protein and albumin, and we want to make sure that we're staying in that range. And this is where we often need help. Some protein drinks, and this is where we want to move beyond Boost and Ensure and high fructose corn syrup and all the junk that's in there. So the oncologist might say, yeah, do Boost or Ensure. And I'll say, no, let's not do that. Let's do ON, or let's do something. Let's look at the ingredients that we don't want and the ingredients that we do want. And hey, why don't we make our own protein shake? Right. So a lot of talk about how do we get in the protein that we need, and not just from animal foods. The combination of plant foods can give us a complete protein. complete protein during treatment and shortly after. And then afterwards, you don't need complete protein with every meal. The liver is quite efficient at storing its aminos. So there's quite a bit of confusion about how much protein we need. So we spend a lot of time talking about how much you need, where to get it from, and not just the protein, because you need the vitamins and minerals to metabolize the protein. Same thing with fat, getting healthy fat. Fat is still demonized. So doctors are still telling people not to eat eggs, and they're having Cheerios for breakfast. So there's still a lot of weirdness out there in terms of advice. So we talk about having eggs with veggies. And then our booster foods. How do we get in booster foods? Whey protein is excellent booster food to boost the immune system, counteract some bone marrow suppression, build lean muscle mass. Flaxseed, chia seed, nutritional yeast, some foods that people are maybe not as familiar with, spices, sauerkraut, and kimchi. So we do a class to show people how to make their own sauerkraut. So this is where people don't really want elaborate recipes. And this is sometimes a lot of people are reluctant to go to nutrition classes, and they're going to learn about chiffonade and kale when they just want to learn how to poach an egg. You'd be amazed how many people are like, I don't really know how to poach an egg. And they don't want to say it. They're not cooking. They'll say, I don't like to cook. I don't cook. Tell me some things to make. And I'll say, okay, let's talk about eggs. So I had a question at a class yesterday. Hey, if I'm on chemo, can I have runny eggs? Because I had said, don't boil the heck out of the egg. Maybe have the egg not really runny, but a little bit soft. Is that okay? Because they're in chemo and their white counts might be low. So I said, yeah, that's okay. So a poached egg would be really kind of lovely. Let's talk about how to poach an egg. Maybe show them a YouTube, one of those quick videos that show you how to poach an egg. And then you've got somebody poaching an egg and sauteing a little bit of greens, putting it on a muffin and putting some turmeric, and they've made themselves breakfast for maybe the first time. And I think I'm getting karma bucks here. So I've given you some recipes. I gave you a recipe for a super simple soup. So what's a super simple soup? Open up a can or a box and heat it up. You're done. Or get a little bit more, chop up some cabbage. I always like to give people a list of what food should you always have in your refrigerator or pantry. Put some cabbage in there. Oh, you got a can of beans? No, put a can of beans. Oh, put some spices in there. Oh, you got mushrooms? Okay, put some mushrooms in there. So making a simple soup with what you have, but if all you have is a box butternut squash soup, heat it up, you're good. It might be that kind of a day, right? So I don't want people feeling bad that I should be eating my kale salad, but you know what? I don't like it. And even if I did like it, I don't have the energy for it. And so I'm just going to have a can of Campbell's soup and some saltine crackers. That's all I want right now. And it's like, okay, you go ahead and have that. Go ahead and have that. And when you're ready, we can talk about ways to make that better, or maybe even swapping out the Campbell's with an Amy's or something like that. So it's really getting into the simplicity, how to have simple meals with what you have in your cupboard. And then once people are through treatment and they say, okay, I'm ready to do a little bit more, turn me on to some cooking classes, or give me one recipe that's, got a little bit more going on. So these are ideas. So that's what our job is, to be the idea person, and have it be a give and take. So in the next class, they'll say, hey, I got that. I didn't do radicchio. I got butter lettuce. And I made that sardine salad that you're talking about. It was really good. And I put some celery in there and curry powder. And then, hey, I found that I could do it on butter lettuce instead of radicchio, because radicchio was kind of expensive. I love to have that dialogue, right? I live for that dialogue. So these are the superstars. I like to call them focus foods. So if I'm giving a talk, I may just spend the whole time talking about mushrooms, or the whole time talking about crucifers, or just have creative ways on highlighting what are some of our foods, because every healthy food has anti-cancer properties. Which one are you going to talk about? maybe one that's in season, one that you've got a cool recipe for. So these are just some superstars. I mean, we may feature one of them. Mushrooms. We're featuring mushrooms now because it's mushroom season. Mushrooms are, let me see, I got a next, yeah, there they are. So I took this picture last week because of all the rain and now the sun, mushrooms are exploding. So I hope you are getting some mushrooms out. They're seeing some mushrooms. You don't want to harvest mushrooms to eat if you don't know what you're doing. But turkey tails are considered forest gum. You pick them up and chew on them when you're hiking in the forest. But turkey tails are one of the mushrooms that has been studied extensively, and it meets the criteria for Western-based studies. There are compounds, PSK is one of them, that they are patented medications for. So if people want to eat mushrooms, then I'll give them recipes. And the ticket about eating mushrooms is cook them, because you need to break down the chitin in order to get at the beta glucans, which is where you get that immune regulation and that cell regulation. One of my jobs is to get people to branch out from the little button crimini mushrooms to get oyster mushroom, trumpet mushrooms, maitake mushrooms. Right now we're getting chanterelles. So those wild mushrooms are going to have a lot more mojo. How are we doing for time? Do we want to do some questions? I don't want to talk too much and not get to some of your
Nancy, I think we could stop sharing screen and open up for discussion, because there's quite a solid base of knowledge here.
Okay.
And we have some really, curious people on the call. So let's go.
Absolutely. Let's go do that. Do you want me to read the questions in the chat, or?
I answered most of them through my chat back. So I would open it up and just have people,
let's
raise their hand or something.
All righty, let's do it.
And let's see some gallery folk. Thank you for that. It's really excellent. What you said that really I emphasized is all healthy food are anti-cancer. Animal, vegetable, mineral, quality, natural, organic, local, fresh, seasonal food. They all have benefits. So people like to say, what is the best, or, which one? And we know there's hundreds.
Exactly.
Yeah. And they compound together. So mixing and matching really adds power.
So we did get, Lisa shared that she can't stand mushrooms. So we have to comment on that one. So mushrooms, a lot of people will do a mushroom powder and mushroom powder extract in a drink or in a capsule. I like the powders just because the data on mushrooms and how it isn't just fighting cancer, it's boosting the immune system. Reishi regulates the spirit. So mushrooms heal on so many levels that if you absolutely hate their texture, you can consider doing a mushroom extract as a powder or a capsule. It should be from a reputable brand that states the percentage of beta glucans, which should be about 10 or 15%. So don't give up on mushroom medicine if you don't like to eat the mushrooms. You can consider mushroom powders.
Nancy, here's a good question. I've heard that fasting prior to chemo makes it easier to tolerate. Do you know if that's the case? From Katie.
Absolutely. I'm glad you mentioned that. I actually have a slide on that. Okay. So fasting and chemo, yes, short-term fasting improves the efficacy of chemotherapy and minimizes the toxic effect on the normal cells. You won't get a lot of support from the medical people on that. They're worried, and you do need to be careful. You don't want to be fasting to the effect that you're falling down, you're getting lightheaded. Correct. So what does it mean? I always tell people, eat about 50% less of what you would eat. Maybe focus on easy to digest foods such as soups, broths, things like that. But yeah, there's quite a bit of data on fasting during chemo, which is typically 1 or 2 days before, the day of, and the day after.
Yes. And it doesn't have to be water fasting.
No, probably shouldn't be a water
It's too,
fasting.
you're going to lose too much. Here's a really
Yeah.
good one is what would be the best help to increase red blood cells in bone marrow for leukemia?
Yeah, astragalus is the Chinese herb with the most data on bone marrow support. In general, anything that's anabolic. So let's look big picture here. You're building. So we want to make sure we have enough protein because that's the main building block. And with time, the bone marrow will repair.
Yes.
Depends on the treatments that you're doing, but mushrooms are great here. Reishi
correct.
mushroom is wonderful as well. So looking at an anabolic, there are different herbs. You can work with somebody to get astragalus combined with several other Chinese herbs can have a building effect, along with reishi and other mushrooms can be very beneficial. Making sure you're getting enough protein. Whey protein can be very good to balance the immune system as well.
Nancy, here's a good question. Another one. What's the recommendation regarding dairy products for an estrogen positive breast cancer survivor?
Yeah, there's a lot of information and concerns about dairy. My take on that is that as long as you're getting organic, high quality dairy from grass fed, well kept animals, it's going to be a beneficial food for most people, unless there's a dairy allergy or a casein allergy or lactose intolerance. So there are concerns about dairy. Insulin like growth factor is one of them. So who has dairy or children who are growing and need growth factors? But I think saying don't have dairy is like throwing the baby out with the bathwater. I think having small amounts of high quality yogurt from grass-fed animals is going to be beneficial on many levels.
Yes.
As long as you can handle the dairy. You don't have any adverse effects from the dairy. So that's my take, is that it's a wonderful nutritive food.
What about tofu and edamame? So obviously there's estrogens and tofu and soy. Let's hear about that. That's a key conversation piece.
Yeah, that's good. And I think there was a lot of misinformation starting back in the 70s that we called a phytoestrogenic food, that therefore it would, but that's not really the case. And they've since backtracked. They don't even say phytoestrogen anymore. They say SERMs, selective estrogen response modifier. There's actually more data showing a preventative effect of soy products rather than a problematic effect. And that's like real soy, not soy cheese or processed soy. So soy is one of those foods a lot of people can't digest. And so if soy is a food that you routinely do, you can continue doing it. Oncologists recommend a couple times a week, not overdoing it. Where we got into trouble is people doing vegans doing like soy protein powders and doing a lot of it. Yes. So it acts on a different receptor site. So actually soy is tofu, tempeh, miso. They're actually quite beneficial unless you have a digestive issue with it.
Absolutely. Here's one. Would A4 cows, and I'm not sure if it's A4 or A2 myself, be better, or goat milk?
Yeah, good question. Easier to digest. So it's a better form of casein that's less allergenic. It depends. If you have an immune reaction to casein, you may just be reacting to any kind of casein. But in general, the goat milk, plus they never give hormones to those animals.
That's correct.
So A2 or goat milk or sheep milk will be easier to digest.
Is raw grass-fed dairy is good if we know the source? It's clean source, pasture raised. It has enzymes, that are beneficial. And obviously raw would be ideal if we could get raw. It's difficult. There are fermented dairy is usually the way to go.
Yes.
I want to make an editorial comment because we're going to run out of time. When they do retrospective study, they say people who eat meat and dairy have higher cancer incidence. But those people are eating commercial meat and dairy with hormones, antibiotics, growth factors, and things that are promoting cancer, plus the feed. If it's not grass, it's grain, and it has, glyphosates and all kinds of problematic things. So we're blaming the animal, which is basically not the problem. Mm-hmm. It's the agricultural system we live in, and same with environmental chemicals. We live in farm workers and,
Mhm.
pollutants and metals and all that stuff and stress
Mhm.
is putting
Absolutely.
us in a very, high disease progression
Mhm.
reality. And what you said in the very beginning is, we're
Mhm.
building health by
Mhm.
taking control of our personal life and our home
Absolutely.
life and our relational life and all that.
Mhm.
And so I think one thing, Nancy, is like, what about people who have cancer or had cancer and want to go it without medicine? Because I think
Yeah.
there's an expectation that people are going to go, I'm going to have treatment, chemo,
Right.
radiation, surgery,
Mhm.
immunotherapy, hormone blockers, etc., which is pretty much mandated. And
Yeah.
particularly if you're in the medical system, that's pretty much it. And maybe you'll squeak in a few cups of tea or, maybe, all that kind of stuff.
Right.
But,
Yeah, well,
you know,
it so much depends on, if you've got a large tumor, there's no way that nutrition is going to debulk that tumor. I like to have an integrative approach. And actually, there is more of a personalized approach. We're still in kind of the cookbook model, pancreatic cancer, here's the recipe for it. And we're trying to say, hey, let's work with the person who has the cancer. And also, let's go even more than that. Let's do the tumor marker testing. And
that's
before we dive into chemotherapy and immunotherapy, let's make sure that tumor is going to react to that. And it's a tricky situation because a conventional oncologist is not going to go by the results of that extra testing. And so you're basically confusing your person. It's the rare person who says, okay, I'm going to spend $4,000 for extra testing. And then when it says this is the protocol I should do, I'm going to fly around the world and find an oncologist to do that. So here's the tricky part. What am I going to share with my people? So most people are not going to just go by nutrition alone. I think it depends on what the state of the cancer is and what the cancer is as well. But from a liability point of view, you have to, if you're working with people, you don't want to be the person that says, well, Nancy says that I can do flaxseed and cruciferous veggies. And I may not have said that. I may have said, hey, these are food compounds that can actually help to prevent and manage cancer. And what did they hear? They heard, hey, I don't have to do chemo. I can do flaxseed and blueberries. And then they do that and then they die. And then I've got a lawsuit, right? So I have a CYA all over the place saying that, hey, we're integrative here. Do consult with your medical doctor before using herbs and supplements, even though they don't usually know much about them. So yeah, most people are not going to just do it with the complementary therapies. Most people are afraid and they're going to do everything. It's just that where that situation comes up, Ed, is that people who have recurrent cancers and they've had so much treatment that made them feel so sick, and then they got a recurrence and they'll say, you know what, I'm not going down that route again. And they'll say, okay, let me work with you. Let's work together as a team.
we'll have Nancy back.
Oops.
And, it really touches my heart because Nancy reflects the Bowman College Eating for Health approach quite nicely.
Yeah.
And Nancy is in the world. See, some people are out of the world. They're in the alternatives. They're in the weeds.
Mm-hmm.
Nancy is working with doctors, with cancer care, with clinics. There's quite
Mm-hmm.
a bit we know and quite a bit we could do that we don't do
Mm-hmm.
because we have to work in some kind of integrative system.
Mm-hmm.
And what we do, and I do it as well, and there are other people in the Bowman universe who help people with disease, including cancer, is help people you get a grip on your life.
Mm-hmm.
Don't give up all your power. Don't stop living.
Absolutely.
You can really do wonderful things if you're maximally optimally nourished. And that's easier
Absolutely.
said than done if you're in the middle of extensive treatment, but it
Exactly.
can be done. And we have chefs and we have nutritionists and we have
Mm-hmm.
community.
Mm-hmm.
And what Nancy and I were talking about earlier is we had a dear friend who just went through a cancer journey. And it was remarkable because she had an aggressive cancer. It was tough. But
Yeah.
the growth that she had spiritually, socially, physically, emotionally, karmically was remarkable. And
Mm-hmm.
she shared that with her friends and family that actually kind of made it different than trying to get rid of tumors. because,
Mhm.
doctors trying to get rid of tumors, and that's
Mhm.
their job. And they do it pretty well. And, there's
Mhm.
certain possibilities and constraints, but the rest of it, this really, caring for the whole person in the most modern, comprehensive, and traditional ways,
Mhm.
because traditional ways are very powerful.
Mhm.
And modern medicine doesn't understand or integrate them, but that's our job, is
Mhm.
to work with individuals, not to treat disease, but to strengthen
Mhm.
intelligence and resilience. That was so beautiful in the beginning. You go,
Mhm.
we have to be strong because we're getting whomped. Whether
That's
we
right.
have a known illness or not, we're just constantly getting whomped with one thing after the next.
Mhm.
But we can get through it, and we are getting through it. And having gatherings like this where we have really smart people who are leaning into this conversation and taking away, like, yeah, I can make a cabbage wrap. Okay.
Mhm.
When all
Exactly.
else fails, I got cabbage in the wrap in the
There
soup.
you go.
Uh,
Exactly.
I mean, there's so many basic things, and that all food, animal and vegetable, have healing benefits, not just herbs
Exactly.
or, a single or a blueberry and so forth.
Right.
But yeah, so I just really, you know, invite people to continue to check out education and Bowman Wellness. Our community is free. BowmanWellness.com. You can join, you'll understand what we're doing, how we're doing it. We have a lot of good resources. We're non commercial. Now, how many people do you know who are non commercial? Nancy is non commercial. Nancy is not selling stuff. I mean, everybody is selling stuff. And,
Yeah,
and illness is quite a good market, right?
absolutely.
It's like, wow, you can make a lot of money on illness, because people are so scared and vulnerable. And I have
Mhm.
cancer clients who are paying boku bucks for nothing,
Yeah,
but they don't know. Somebody's promising hope.
right.
But, you know, we do the best we can, and we can manage cancer. Do you hear that?
Mhm.
It's not that we beat cancer, it's not that we
Mhm.
eliminate cancer, but we can slow cancer progression. And over
Mhm.
time, and it takes a lifetime, it dissipates. So that's an interesting thought. Very few doctors go, "Oh yeah, it could kind of go through a cycle, and it could grow, and then it could regress, because it can regress, but it's hard
Mhm.
giving all the pressure that people are under who have disease and the rush to
Mhm.
treatment." So
Mhm.
again, as Nancy and I both know, there's certain kind of cancers you got to treat, and treat quickly and get after it.
Mhm.
But all cancers have different growth cycles. So
Mhm.
with modern evaluation, you can find out what is it, what's the cell line, what's the growth rate, how quickly does it metastasize or not. And so having clients and people who are well educated to have conversations with oncologists is a lot of what we provide. And then it's still difficult because the medical system tends to be somewhat um, overwhelming.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. But thank you. And Christina, you have any concluding remarks?
Thanks so much again, everyone, for joining us. I put in the chat the date and topic of our next Lunch and Learn. Friday, February 17th, we have evidence-based creative strategies for promoting and managing health.
Who's
And I have the
teaching that
link.
class?
I'm sorry?
Who's teaching that class?
I'm teaching that
That's
class.
right. It's a Christina class on the arts for healing, and
Yeah.
it's going to be really cool.
So if you're interested in evidence-based creative strategies, please join us on February 17th. And I have the link to our Eventbrite page in the chat, so you can register if you're interested. Would love to see you at our next one.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
All right. Thank you. It was lovely